morning, good afternoon, and you're going to find out why it's the afternoon for some of you and why it's the morning for others. This is a very special episode of the podcast because I'm recording this, well, he's recording live, but we're actually broadcasting this one live with my good friend, Catharina, who's going to introduce herself in a minute. This is going to be released as a podcast later, but today we are live streaming this on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I see you did your makeup. I'm a little flustered. People are watching us, Cathie. So it is so good to see you this morning, my time, not in the morning, your time. So I'd love if you'd introduce yourself for us. Where are you in the world? A little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me, Jason. It's always great to see you.
It's my pleasure.
Even though it's been way too long, just seeing you virtually. But yeah, it's 2 p.m. over here, so I just had my lunch, successfully not in a soup coma.
Over where? You didn't tell us where you are.
I was about to say that. Oh. Yeah, located in Hamburg, which is in the northern part of Germany, which is also the reason why it's 2 p.m. over here and not 8 a.m. as it is at your place, right? Eastern time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I work with a lot of people all over the world, so I know not all of the time zones in the States. I think that'll need a little bit more practice to learn all of them. It's also not really a goal of mine, but Eastern time I can calculate.
It's not high on your goal list for 2022 is to be able to snap which each one. Well, and you used to live in New York, so you're very familiar with that time difference.
I used to live there. Yes, exactly. So that's where we met as well, right?
Yes.
I moved at the end of 2019 with my husband, right before the global pandemic, which was not exactly what we planned. Of course, nobody planned that, I think. But we had 4 months of an incredible experience of how Manhattan looks and feels like. And then the global pandemic hit and everything was turned upside down. But walking on a completely empty Times Square and Park Avenue was also kind of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Experience. Yeah.
Yes. So as we get into it today, there's many reasons we're here. One, we know each other quite well, been friends for quite a while. And you're a self-proclaimed introvert. And we have some scientific data to prove that. I believe you've taken some assessments and such. Anybody who's ever met me knows that I am a self-proclaimed and an extrovert. And we thought we'd have a fun discussion today about, one, what that means, how we apply it in our leadership, how we can make it all work with our teams regardless, and talk about energy drainers, energy drivers, and then, as always, we're going to have some fun while we do it and hopefully entertain our audience. And for those audience, throw in the questions if you have them on LinkedIn or Facebook as we're broadcasting this live. And what we are going to do is I'm going to do a special Q&A in the podcast episode, and you and I will come back on and answer those questions together in a separate thing so that we can maintain our conversation for today. So, Catharina, are you tired yet? As an introvert, are you tired yet? We've been talking for 3 minutes and 27 seconds.
Well, if that would be the case, then I'd definitely have the wrong job. Luckily, it doesn't work that way. But I have to say that I was a little nervous before we joined the call. And I think partially, probably that's not my introverted self, but more my German self. It's like, oh, we need to do a tech check. And then, my German brain was calculating all the different ways of how things could go sideways. And then your car broke down. So there you go.
And then the thing that went wrong is on my side. And I'm over here.
I'm pretty chilled now.
Yeah. And I'm over here. I've done 130 some episodes of podcasts. I'm like, it's all good. I've got some new equipment. It's going to work out. I tested it last night. So I'm calm, cool, and collected the whole time. And then what happens? My car breaks down, which is why we're a few minutes late today. So apologies for that. And we still have some great time with you. So Cathie, let's start with defining extroversion and introversion, because a lot of times I hear people say this, it's like, oh, to be in sales, you have to be extroverted. And, oh, it's like people like networking or they're out loud, and it can mean that. But scientifically, and in the Myers-Briggs, for example, or other scientific communities, that's not actually what it means. Would you share with us your understanding, because I know you've done research on this, what your understanding of what we mean when we say introversion and extroversion?
Yeah. And just as a disclaimer, everyone, I studied psychology, so The answer might be a little nerdy.
This is why I love Cathie. This is why you're here.
Yes, I own that.
Yes.
No, maybe before we talk about the content and the definition itself, maybe upfront, like usually, you're not 100% introverted or 100% extroverted. I know that you always say like, oh, I'm 100% extrovert. And yes, you are an extrovert, but usually it's a sliding scale. So for everyone who's listening today or whenever they listen to the podcast, it doesn't mean that you have to be 100% this or that. So usually we all are somewhat introverted and somewhat extroverted. Depending on your personality structure, the scale slides from one side to another.
Well, Cathie, I just wanted to address that for myself really quickly. According to Myers-Briggs, I am 100% E extroversion. That's where I get that from. It doesn't mean that I don't like my own peace and quiet, but according to Myers-Briggs, I am 100% extrovert, and I took it and got coached on it last year. So that is new, but maybe I am going to shift a little bit. I get older and at some point I'm like, okay, all right, enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, usually personality traits are not changing that much over the lifetime. There were a lot of studies around that, but there is some movement. So maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
Having 2 kids might also change you. And the puppy. And the pandemic. So you
and a pandemic.
That.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but back to the topic. What introversion and extroversion really is about is where you get your energy from. There were a lot of research about what it is and what it's not. And as simple as it is, it's really, if you're an introvert, you get your energy more from alone time. And if you're an extrovert, you get your energy from being with people and connection and being with them, like physically being with people. So, for example, as an introvert, you probably are more in the zone and more energized when you work at a quiet place by yourself or in smaller meetings or what we do right now, one-on-one. And all the people who are out there, but I can't see them, so it's not that draining for me. But, and if you're more extroverted, you probably, if you work from home, then you would probably choose going to a coffee shop, because what you need and what you build up on is the energy in the room. I do have a few clients who are saying that after working from home for such a long time, what helped them throughout the pandemic or the last weeks of being home and flexible and whatnot is going to a place where people were, walking around or working themselves to build up on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about virtual, because you had mentioned in person, and I'm reminded of a conversation I had. I do a lot of coaching work with salespeople, and salespeople definitely skew towards extroversion. I think it's one of the reasons people go into sales. It's obviously a people profession, and they were telling me, and they work for a large tech company that's now back in person 2 days a week, and they were saying most of them were saying how much they loved being back in person, but how they didn't get any work done because they just ended up talking to people and hanging out and going to lunch and all of these things. And so I think that's been the trap in my career when I worked in corporate as well, is I get, I'm a chatterbox. I love to connect with people and talk, and that fills me up, but then it takes away from work. So that's like love your opinion on that. And then the second part of the question, yes, I'm going to stack a question, is how does this all apply virtually? Since most of the work that I do is virtual, most of the work that you do is virtual, and most of the world is still pretty much virtual. How does extroversion and introversion apply in the virtual world?
Yeah. So let me first answer your first question about being in person and spending time with people. I think something that they recently found out in research is that we have a different reaction to social interaction. So when you connect with someone and you interact with someone, then you have a higher level of dopamine, right? So you're like happier, it makes you happy, you're satisfied, all that. And introverts need smaller doses than extroverted people.
Oh, cool.
So I'm happier when I don't see so many people and the interaction is shorter, and you need more people and more time to spend with people. So that's one of the really physiological process that happens inside your body. And I like to compare it with, drinking alcohol. If you're drinking alcohol, then everyone has a different level of what feels good to them. Some drink one glass of wine, some need 5 or 25. Like, it's just very different.
25. I've been there. I did not feel good when I do that the next day. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that brings me to the next topic, because if you have a too higher level of that, of social exposure or interaction, what introverts experience sometimes is a hangover, like literally a hangover, because your body is like, it's too much. You have a physical reaction to too much social interaction. And we all know that human beings are very adaptive, right? Where also during the pandemic, it was challenging for everyone, but after a few weeks of being in it, it got a little easier to be with it all, like the uncertainty and figuring out how life works. And that's the same here too, I think, to answer your second question, that we get used to it. So introverts being back at the office, extroverts being back at the office have a very different experience, A, because of the physical reaction inside your body, and B, because we're just not used to it.
Yeah. And you identify as an introvert, but you do like being with people, in the room with people. It's just what I'm hearing is I know you're a real people person. You love people. It's just you need more recharge time. And for me, I like that actually is my recharge time. Mm-hmm. So we've shared spaces together where we're doing trainings and things together. And a lot of times people go, "Oh, I'm so drained," or, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired." And I'm like, from what? It literally doesn't make me tired. What makes me tired is isolation, not connecting with good people and spending time with good people. So I just want to say that for everybody listening, that just because you're introverted doesn't mean you don't love people. You're not a people person. You don't like networking. It just means, really what it means is you need more time to recharge your tank, to think and to recharge. So, part of what we're going to talk about today is, what do introverts need to know about extroverts and vice versa, as a way for us to build even more camaraderie, community, and like what we know, because what we know in the work environment, and you and I both do coaching work in work environments, is that we forget that not everybody's the same as us when we're operating, and we expect people are going to operate the same way. And the best teams that I know and the best managers and leaders respect that people have different processes. So for you specifically, Cathie, how does this show up for you in the kind of work that you do? Since you speak, you run group facilitations, you do one-on-one work. How does this show up for you? Like, what's your experience like as somebody who is a people-based business and also is introverted?
Yeah. I think what you said earlier applies. It's all a question of balance. And I know that when I have, a full day of a training with a lot of participants, it's not that I don't like it. I like people. Everyone likes people. That's like a human basic need. Everyone needs connection. We just need it in different doses, I guess. And for me, if I know that I'm busy with a lot of trainings in a row, like sometimes my weeks are super busy, then I know I need to block time to just be by myself and basically regulate my nervous system. Because otherwise it's like I overpace. I get so excited and I'm so like on that I have a hangover afterwards. I can't fall asleep because I'm still going. So that's something that I notice in my life. When I'm too busy, I need to make sure that I have blocks. But in general, like I'm an introvert and I love people. That introverts don't like people really is a myth. That's not true. Yeah, and also that all introverts are shy or quiet. That's also not true. Being shy is very different. I mean, there is again, psychological nerd here. But if you look at the Big Five, which is the most common personality test or personality model that is actually also validated by science, and they have extroversion as one area to look at, and then they also have neuroticism, which is more about being shy. It's more about like how much do I overthink? Is there like a social fear or anxiety, maybe even? to look at. And it's two different things. Like for me, I used to be very shy. I didn't really enjoy talking to people. And sometimes that still hunts me. But it's a learned behavior. And you can choose, otherwise. I mean, when I look at my school, the worst thing for me ever was to prepare a presentation. That was like my worst nightmare. And so what I did, I was not preparing very well. So I was thrown into the classroom and I had to improvise. And then I started to enjoy it. And now I'm a trainer. I bet if I would tell my teacher back then that this is what I do right now, they would just not believe it.
Until they saw you here on this live and they'd go, wait, oh, she's great.
Yeah.
I had a question there about you'd mentioned when you go, the way it landed for me is like you mentioned when you hit your limit or when you go to the point that for you specifically, Cathie, how do you know when it's time for you to recharge?
That's a good question. And it's sometimes very difficult to say. That was an experience. So for everyone who's listening and wondering about the same thing, it's just creating awareness, being aware, checking in with yourself where you're at and what you need in the moment. Because when I am in the moment, because I love people and I love my job and I love to be connected and facilitate trainings and do coachings and all of that, I don't recognize it. I usually recognize it too late, a little bit with alcohol, right? It was fun 5 minutes ago. And then suddenly you realize, oh, your head is already starting to spin or you develop a headache or something. Yeah. So I got better at it, but yeah.
Second question, you'd mentioned also the idea and of a little brain fog still, just to own it. You mentioned the idea around, oh man, I'm going to lose my train of thought here. I lost it. I'll come back to it. So I want to dig in here on what extroverts should know about introverts and ask you a few questions. And then I would love if you would then interview me the same, so we can kind of flesh that out together. So some things that I'm curious about. Oh, sorry. I'm going to go back to it. I know what I was thinking. I've taken that assessment. For those listening, what's the name of that assessment? I've taken it, and I'm going to tell you I'm 99% extroversion and 1% neuroticism on that, as I remember. So that makes sense. I'm not shy. I don't have any social anxiety, and I'm very extroverted. For those listening who want to take that, I took it for free somewhere on some sort of university website. What is the name of that assessment?
I don't. So the assessments are based on the model, and the model is called Big Five or Ocean.
The Big Five.
So it's like 5 different personality traits. Those are the ones that are well researched and science, like over years and decades, and they've figured out that this is the most reliable assessment or model to look at personality overall. I have to look out for assessments because most the assessments that I know are actually costing money. But I think that I can find some free ones afterwards, so we can share it in a link or something.
Yeah, we'll put that on we'll put the assessment. That's the Big Five. We'll put that in the comments on the live here on LinkedIn, and we'll also put it in the show notes in the podcast. It's a fun one. It asks you a lot of questions. It's a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. So something I'm curious about with introversion. What do you want? You're in a conversation, having a good time, it's engaging, and then you realize, hey, I'm starting to feel that, like we talked about that moment, where I need a break. I need to recharge. I'm not feeling 100% emotionally intelligent. And you've got somebody like me on the other side who's like ready to rock till 5 a.m, talk over drinks or whatever. How do you address that with people? And I'm asking partially for those that are listening that are married. Highly unlikely that you and your partner are the same in this.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do you, like, what do you say or what do you feel? How do you operate in that model when you've got, I'm sure you have friends you see socially that are more extroverted that want to hang out longer, and you're like, I gotta take a break. How do you deal with that?
I think that also developed over time. I mean, my friends know me and they know that I can do both, right? But what I usually ask myself before I go there, like, how important is this meeting or get together with friends, and how do I want to stay long or not? And be upfront about what I'll do. Like, I'll just share with my friends. And in German, there's a saying, you say, ich werde nicht alt, which means I won't get old today. That means that you're leaving not too late. That's one way to address it. But I think in general, it's the tricky part is to know that before, right? Where you add and where your battery level is, because not only, it doesn't mean that like an evening with friends will drain your battery completely. But if you've been in an in-person workshop, or you had a day at work where you had a lot of meetings, where you met a lot of people and you had a lot of group discussions, you might be a little tired of that. So then you need to be just honest about it and address it if you want to. If not, then you can also suffer in silence, because usually, I mean, I wouldn't probably address it and say like, Jason, come on, could you just please
shut up?
Stop it. Shut it.
I'll say the word, shut up.
Shut up. Yeah. But I mean, that depends on who you are, right? Again, like being introvert doesn't mean that you're shy necessarily. So some who are introverted don't have an issue with addressing it in the room and say like, hey, Jason, you talked a lot. Can we just take a pause here and circle back to an idea that you talked earlier on? I'd like to get a little bit more in depth around it. That's one way to do it. But generally, as an introvert, it's a little tricky to jump in. So trying to look for a break and then jump in there.
Yeah. I'm friends and I know a lot of speakers. I have a lot of speakers on the podcast. And when this comes up, a lot of speakers are very introverted. I'm talking about public speakers, people that get out in front of 500,000, 2,000 people. And I know somebody who's just an incredible speaker who's spoken in front of 50,000 people, got paid a lot of money. And when you meet him, very introverted. But when you see him on stage, you would think he's always going to be the life of the party. And this is a good example of where I think introverts, you can generate that energy, but then it's time to go recharge. Me, when I speak, I can go speak and then I'm ready to go speak again. Then I'm ready to go speak again, record a podcast after podcast, see a client after client.
Right.
I don't know that that's so healthy because what I've realized during the pandemic is I'm going to use the word reliant. And I'm married, I have kids, so I am around people all the time. I am around people in person, and all my work is I see people every day. I'm interacting with them. Part of the reason I'm a podcaster, because I love talking to people, cool people especially. There's a challenge as an extrovert, especially during the pandemic, when you're not interacting with people as much. And so I realized for me is I needed to be in spaces where I was in groups of people, and that I've realized for me, this is something I'd like, and at least this is how I am as an extrovert. One-on-one I like, but it's not my favorite. I'd actually rather be in a group of people. Like being on a Zoom with like 25 to 30 people, speaking to them or interacting with them I'd actually like more. That's my ultimate. That's my juice. That fills me up. I love that. I have no nervousness about it. Does that, for you, I know that you speak to audiences of that size and bigger as well. Does that fill you up in the moment? And then do you realize afterwards I need to recharge, or are you ready to go again? Like, how does that work for you as you're sourcing it? And we're talking virtually right now.
Yeah. I think it depends a little bit on the group and the topic. I think for me, it's linked to the depth of the conversation. What I can do is like typical networking Zoom calls where you're switching breakout rooms every 2 minutes and you just pitch your stuff and then you move on.
Yeah.
After that, I'm like completely drained. I usually hop off during the call because that's not who I am. That's not what I enjoy. And so my battery gets low very, 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 very quickly. With bigger groups, I can run trainings the whole day. I won't feel tired during the training. I would feel tired in the evening though. So we're talking virtual here, but in person, I would be the kind of trainer that would, prefer to hang out on the hotel room and read a book rather than having drinks or dinner with the participants in the evening. I mean,
okay.
I can do it, but if I have the choice, I prefer to be by myself and like recharge that way.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So what specifically, I want to talk about processing and speaking, external processing, internal processing. One of the things that I learned through when I did some Myers-Briggs work was I knew this concept, but the idea of external processors and internal processors. And again, this is also a gradient. Like you're a complete external processor, a complete internal processor. Where do you see yourself landing on that scale of how, and well, let me define that for the audience first. I'm going to use myself as an example. I generally don't know what I'm going to say until exactly when I say it. And that's actually what connects to my head. And that's how I actually process things. I mean, I have an idea, but it's generally in the moment. Internal processing, which I'm not, is more, it's been described to me more as, and this happens very quickly, is more of I think about what I want to say, I edit what I want to say, and then I say it. I'm generally not doing that, at least not consciously. I mean, we're always doing that as humans in a way. So for you, how does that mechanism or how does that processing operate for you as an introvert?
I'd say I'm probably more an internal processor than an external processor, but it also depends on who am I talking to.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we both work together. You were coaching me for a while. And you know that I can also verbally process whatever is happening, especially things that I don't have access to right away that seem complex or tricky to me. So in one-on-one, I'm sometimes leaning more into the verbal processor, and I can talk a lot. But in bigger groups, I'm more an internal processor. So what you explained earlier, what I do is I observe and listen. And then I start thinking about my own idea and then jumping in when there is a place to jump in. That's my automatic default. That's how I'm wired, not meaning that this is always how I show up in groups, but from my natural being who I am, that this is how my brain works. I prefer to observe and listen, especially if it's a new group, and then build up on that versus, starting to talk right away and processing in the moment if I have a choice.
If you have a choice and you're in your natural mode, which I know you like to practice something outside of what your automatic is. One of the things you're very good at. So I'm sure you practice having it go differently.
Yeah.
And that leads me to the topic of introversion in the workplace. And I'd like to look at just humans. I'd also like to take a look at women in the workplace. There's been a lot written about this. We've got books about this, about how can women show up more powerfully. I'm sure there's people listening to this and people that are watching us live that say, that all sounds great. I'd like to show up more powerfully, and I don't have the room. I don't have the space. Like, there's people on my team, they're going to take up all the energy. They're going to take up all the time. How do I be more assertive without coming across as something that isn't authentic to me? And I'm thinking in my career, this is something that I was working on, is giving people more space too. Because for me, I have to think about it more, and it's something I'm constantly working on. Podcasting's great for that, by the way. really good way to practice that, interviewing people. The idea that we go back to the external processing, a lot of the times, and I'll say this for everybody listening, a lot of the people that I know, myself included, it's not that we need to be heard, it's that we don't actually know what we have until we process it. And so what would you have for people that are listening? They're like, hey, I'm on a team. It's a pretty type A team, go-getters. And we have these people on this team that they take up most of the space. And this is also something for leaders to be looking out for. Do you have people on your team that are more introverted that need that space? There are actual techniques to run meetings around this. And then there's also just the awareness of it. So just, a general topic, love to hear your thoughts on this. I know you actually do trainings on this, which is why I'm bringing this.
Yeah. Trainings and coachings as well. And as you said, it's a both end, right? It's like, it's a team dynamic, and then there is a leader involved who can model a culture of, belonging. That's actually part of a culture of belonging as well, to make sure that everyone's heard. And introverts and women both, who are typical, groups at work that sometimes don't get the time to talk as much as they want to. And here as well, it's a both end. It's like, on the one hand, I need to own that I'm an introvert and a woman. And if that topic is important to me, then I need to practice ways to sneak my way into the conversation. And there are a lot of ways to do it, right? You can prepare for a conversation in the meeting, so you know that what you're going to say is good enough to talk it out loud. You can try to interrupt people in a way that it feels still authentic. Also, something that I just discussed with a client earlier, she was like, yeah, okay, I'll practice it, but do you think that my clients, my team members will think that something's wrong when I'm completely different? Even though it seems like a big change for us, it usually doesn't seem that big for everyone else.
Yeah.
So just as a side note, like, yes, start small and start with things that seem manageable for you to do. But also, if you want to go all in and say, like, today, I'll be always the first, if I have a thought, then I'll address it right away. It doesn't mean that you'll be perceived as inauthentic or your team members will be confused or anything. So I think the main key is really like owning how you operate, and then getting clear on what you want to bring to the call, and then practice ways to get there. And of course, it's for extroverts the same thing, right? Ownership, that you are someone who's verbally processing and who likes to go with the flow and who likes to communicate and connect with people, and that there are some people that need to be involved that are not as loud as you are, maybe.
Yeah. I love the context of the word that you used, sneak. That's so good. Like, where can I weasel my way into this conversation? That's so good. That's so good. What about
and leaders? I think, by the way,
yes.
We were just shortly talking a little bit about diversity. I think that's the great part here too, because a lot of research found out that diverse teams are the best. So you need people from all kinds of sizes, shapes, color, personality traits, whatever it is. So for leaders listening, there is a reason, like there's evidence that we should try to involve everyone in a conversation. And yes, like extroverts might be the ones who are firing up the folks and like who are very passionate about it and who are feeling the energy of a room, and it can address whatever is there really quick in the moment. But then introverts are also able to slow down a conversation and go deep instead. And that's helpful sometimes as well.
Yeah. What are some resources that you've taken a look? I know there's some books like Think Fast and Think Slow. There's Quiet, I believe, is the famous book about introversion that was a huge bestseller a few years ago. Any other resources that you'd recommend, Cathie, for people that are interested in this topic, extroversion, introversion, working on diverse teams, more effective?
Yeah. I mean, Brené Brown is a classic, right? She identifies as an introvert too, by the way.
Which is really amazing.
Yeah, if you see her on stage, you wouldn't assume that, but she's an introvert, and she mentions it in some of her books as well. So if you're at a point where you want to get to know you as a person a little bit better and find language for what you experience, then I can only highly recommend her current book, Atlas of a Heart. Not sure if you read it, Jason, but it's incredible to just have the language to explain what is happening inside your head and your body. And Dare to Lead as well. It's a wonderful book about leadership, which is also a lot rooted in belonging and ownership and, choosing courage, because this is something that we as introverts and who are more shy than others need to choose more often in meetings, in group meetings, than extroverts, to be courageous and jump in and say it and address it in the moment.
Yeah. For those who know me, I do coaching work at a company called Life Hikes, and we do communication strategy for groups on how to be better communicators on virtual and in person. We have a whole module on how to involve teams. So I want to actually offer something up for those listening who have recognized this, and that leaders or teammates recognize that this is a thing that's happened, and it's very natural that this is going to happen. I think back in my career, and I think back, this happened a lot in my teams, and I worked on type A sales teams, but there's always going to be a great gradient. So I have two things. That one is leaders, And this reminds me of something that was said in a training room that I was in through the coaching program that I went through. And we had a person who was really good. He was also very introverted. And somebody asked him to speak up more. And he said the best way to get an introvert to shut up and shut down is to ask them to speak up more. To like actually say like, we need you to speak up more. So that's the first. And would you agree with that, to like force somebody to have to speak, or, hey, we're going to go around the room and everybody's going to give 5 minutes on this? Like that is not generally a thing that works very well at all.
No. Yeah, no, not at all. Like that's one of the myth about introversion, or, extroverts working with introverts. We don't need your help we don't need to be pushed in front of the crowd. Like we're grown up people. We know what we want. We know what we like.
That.
And, just because we're quiet, it doesn't mean that we're too shy or we're not able to talk and speak up. And I like to contribute, but as soon as someone's like calling me out or saying like, oh, you've been quiet today, like what's happening, let's go, like say it, then usually I'm like, no, I'm out, sorry. That doesn't work.
And so that's the thing I wanted to mention there before I give a how-to here, is there's nothing wrong with being quiet. If you don't have something to say, you don't need to say it. And that applies for everybody. Extroverts, I'm speaking to myself right now. Even if you have something to say, doesn't mean you have to say it. Is it going to be valuable? And so that's the first thing I'd say is, for leaders, recognize that in your team. And then one of the things we teach at Life Hikes Own the Room that's really effective is getting the audience involved. And this is for team meetings, is, hey, we're going to go around the room at the end of this meeting, and we're going to start with Cathie. We're going to go to Jason, then we're going to go to Christine. Just like to hear one takeaway from today. And it's just a way to get people involved and have people feel seen and feel heard without, hey, Catharina, what did you get from the meeting? And like a big open-ended thing. It's like you give somebody something specific and what it does is it models that everybody should be involved. And it actually models that, one, people have something valuable to contribute, because who cares if you're an introvert? You have valuable things to contribute, whether or not you say them. For extroverts, like, wow, it's really nice to hear from this person. I want to hear more from them. So it's a way to model it without making it, hey, you need to speak up more, right? Like nobody likes being told that they have. At least I don't like being told. I don't think you do either. You have to do this or you have to do that. So that's just an easy way as leaders, like, hey, we're just going to go around, and you name the people ahead of time. And what it also does is it gives people time to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Some time to process. And again, just because I'm introvert doesn't mean that I'm shy and that I'm not talking a lot. Introverts can talk a lot, just that we're not mixing this up here at the moment right now.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I just lost my train of thought. You said something and I wanted to add on that. Oh, it's gone. Anywho, but I think you said something around leadership, which leads me to a conversation that I'm also having a lot with companies right now. A lot of them are looking to find ways to have people be more engaged and more happy at the workplace. And I think one skill that we two also talked a lot about is empathy as a leader.
Yeah.
That is such a core skill to develop. And empathy starts with listening. So that's the link to what you said. It's not necessarily to push someone on stage and say, like, here you go, now you can shine in the light, and like whatever. But it's understanding what that person actually really needs and what they're excited about and what they would like to talk about. And then on the other hand, as an introvert who is more leaning backwards, it's also your job to figure out how you want to show up at a workplace. Because if you want to work as a CEO or a CTO or a CMO, whatever, if you want to be on top of it, then you need to speak up, because your opinion and what you're saying is valuable and important for the company. So there's no way to just not say it because you don't feel like it. But maybe you don't have to address it in the meeting right away. Some things that I do, for example, in networking a lot, if I don't feel like, speaking up in the big group a lot, what I usually do is I start one-on-one conversations, not during the meeting because that's unpolite. Well, it depends on the meeting. But there's always a chance to connect with the participants afterwards. Like you can always reach out to them afterwards and say like, hey, you had a great idea in the beginning of the conversation. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the project that you do right now, and start a conversation one-on-one if that's what you prefer. If that's what you say is like where you are in your natural being and that feels okay for you to be with. Or prepare up front. You can also research the people that you're in the room with and then start a conversation up front so you have something to add on in the meeting. But again, you can work on speaking up. That is a skill that you can actually practice.
Yeah. I want to add on to that as we start to wrap up. And thank you. That is really valuable. You and I have spent shared time in spaces where people don't speak up a lot. You have some people, and we're talking about training programs where people, and you can watch, and this is mostly virtual, and it happens in the room. You can look at people and you know that they have something to say. You can see it in their face. And I know, because I coach some of these people, that what comes up for them is it's not going to be valuable. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be perceived as smart. I'm not going to be perceived as this. And this, I don't think this is so much an introversion, extroversion thing. What I do think, at least speaking for myself, is when you lean more towards extrovert, you're just more willing to say it because you know it's going to process as you say it. I would really encourage men, women, if you have something to say, it is highly likely that it's valuable for that room. Highly likely. And this is like anything in life. The doubt that you have in your own mind, and you said this earlier, Cathie, about something else, is that the thing that feels big to you, it's not going to feel big to us at all. So really, I encourage everybody, speak up. Any of the spaces you're in, what you have to say is valuable. Mm-hmm. And there is gold in almost everything that people say. There's always something to learn. There's something to be curious about. And one of the interesting things of going through a coach training program, like you and I have both done, is learning that there's always something. And for me, me personally, I love to hear from all types of people. I didn't always used to. When I was in my sales career, I like to hear from people that wanted to buy stuff from me. Mm-hmm. Now I'm really interested. And I've learned through the work I do with this podcast, like this would be episode like 125. Man, I've interviewed people of all, you could probably map us all out on some sort of scale and we'd have every single personality type now. Everybody's got something really awesome to share with the world. So just encourage you all to speak up for those watching, listening. Yeah. Cathie, as we wrap up, and in
also,
Germany,
before you wrap up, sorry, Jason, that's the way how you can interrupt in a polite way, by the way, as an introvert. I wanted to add what you said, especially for women, by the way. If you're listening and you're a leader in a company and you're female, we just found out in the research, well, I did not, I just read the research, that women are more likely to speak up if their female role model speaks up. So you have a responsibility to speak up because then others will follow. If you want to hear more female voices and you're female yourself, speak up.
Well, isn't that just so perfect that you're here on a podcast, live, people watching, and hundreds of people are going to listen to this? Thank you for speaking up today, Cathie. Thank you for making a difference. As we wrap up, how can people connect with you, find out more about the work you do, and just learn more about you?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously. So I assume that we'll put that in the show notes later. I also have a website, but then you also find me in my own podcast that I co-host with 3 more incredible coaches that we're translating in different languages. We have English, German, Spanish, and Mandarin language. The podcast is called I Feel Awful, Chronicles of Leadership. It's a micro podcast, super cool. It's only 3 minutes, so there's no excuse to not listen to it because you don't have the time.
Yeah, and perfect for introverts. You're like 3 minutes and I'm done.
Exactly.
Yes. Great. Excellent. Yeah. We will put all that in the show notes. Well, Cathie, I want to thank you so much for being on today, for sharing your wisdom, for the difference you make for the people in your life, that you're doing all the training work, the coaching work, for the podcast in German. So people in German that's their primary language can listen to. And I look forward to having...
This week I also did the English version, so if you want to listen to my English voice, that's true. Yeah, that's possible as well.
There it is. And I wish you the very best in everything you're up to, and we'd love to have you back on again soon. Goodbye, everybody. Wow. Thanks for watching today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.